Hi, friends. This is 5 Minutes to Make Sense of the Bible. I'm Joe Hopkins. Today we focus on the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 1 through 21, or more, which is the story of the coming of the Holy Spirit on Pentecost. Let's dive into the context and content of this Bible passage, and then we'll reflect with some questions. The book of Acts shares stories and teachings of the followers of Jesus after Jesus had ascended into heaven, which, by the way, can be found in Acts chapter 1. However, before Jesus left his followers, he had told them to wait in Jerusalem for the gift of power of the Holy Spirit. In other books of the Bible, primarily the Gospel of John, Jesus gave his followers the Holy Spirit by breathing on them. Find that story in John chapter 20, verse 22. Yet the primary story of the arrival of the Holy Spirit is in Acts 2, the day of Pentecost. Pentecost was already a holiday among Jewish people at the time of Jesus. Jews still celebrate this holiday, and they call it Shavuot in Hebrew, and it occurs 50 days after Passover. The word Pentecost comes from the Greek phrase meaning 50th day, the Greek language being important because the whole New Testament of the Bible was originally written in Greek. Faithful Jews in Jesus' time and shortly after were supposed to travel to the Jewish temple in Jerusalem as a pilgrimage. So there were a lot of Jews from out of town in Jerusalem while Jesus' followers were waiting for the fulfillment of Jesus' promise of the Holy Spirit. The story goes, according to Acts chapter 2, that on the day of Pentecost, Jesus' followers were hanging out in one room when they experienced the sound of a rushing wind and saw tongues of fire hovering over their heads. The Jesus followers then began to speak a variety of languages, presumably languages that they hadn't been able to speak before that moment. They must have gone outside then, and people who spoke diverse languages heard the Jesus followers speaking in their languages. Folks on the Jerusalem street wondered what was happening, and some mocked the Jesus followers. Then Peter, the de facto leader of the Jesus followers after Jesus' ascension, began to speak. The bulk of Acts chapter 2, really verses 14 through 36, is Peter's Pentecost sermon. Peter refers to writers of the Jewish Bible, what Christians often call the Old Testament, to explain the wonders that were happening, especially referencing the prophet Joel and a few different psalms which are attributed to King David. Between the Jewish Bible references, Peter shares about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and Peter eventually ends by proclaiming that Jesus, who was crucified, is Lord and Messiah. Feeling spirited yet? Here are a couple contemporary questions for reflection. First, how do you understand the relationship between Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit? Do you think the Holy Spirit was active in the world before Pentecost? Next, have you ever made a pilgrimage? That is, traveling for a spiritual purpose? If not, what might be a destination that you might visit for a spiritual purpose? Finally, what is a language that you don't currently speak that you would like to speak? Find out if there is a church that uses that language for its worship services. Just for fun. So there, 5 minutes to make sense of the Bible. Usually I preach sermons at Streetsville United Church based on the Bible readings I talk about here. But this week, I'm joining with 8 other United Church of Canada communities of faith to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the United Church, and also to celebrate Pentecost. In any case, please subscribe to this channel for more of our videos about the Bible. And as you read the Bible by yourself, pay attention to what piques your curiosity. The Spirit often tries to catch our attention through our curiosity. As always, while it's good to read the Bible by ourselves, we make the most sense of the Bible when we read the Bible together. Peace, friends.